You can't keep using tools of oppression and expect to raise free people.
So when I was 17, all I could think about was I got these two beautiful baby boys, like just beautiful, who are relying on me for everything. I gotta be something. And I just knew that the way for me to be something was I gotta get to school. I need to just like be a boss because they deserve it.
Today's guest is Trudi Lebron. You just heard a little bit from 17-year-old Trudi. By the time she was 17, as she said, she'd had 2 boys. She dropped out of school in her 8th month of her first pregnancy. So that was 9th grade. And as we know, the stories that are told to us about little Latina girls, in Trudy's case, she identifies as a biracial Latina, brown girls who become pregnant and drop out of school, there's one narrative that we're force-fed all the time. And Trudi reminds us that there are many outcomes to that story, and some of them are fantastic. Trudi is now the mother of 3 sons, all of whom identify as Black and Latino. And we're going to talk today about the self-directed path and how that freed not only Trudi, but her sons, also all of the people in Connecticut and around the world who benefit from how Trudi turns her lived experiences into life's work and service. Skype was trying not to let us be great at one point, so Trudi and I talked a little bit about her path to college in particular, since I know that's a common question that comes up for folks, and the recording was choppy. But I'm going to tell you what she said. I asked Trudi if it was difficult to get into college. To address that, how hard was it to study and pass college entrance testing? She said, it wasn't difficult at all. I started at a local community college and tested into credit level courses with no remediation needed. I spent 2 years there before transferring to a state college. I found out about a scholarship that was designed for older moms who had accumulated some college credit but had to leave school to raise children. This scholarship was designed to allow moms to come back to school to finish their education. I technically didn't meet the age requirement for the program, and I hadn't been out of school, but I requested a meeting with the college president and told her that if they didn't give me the scholarship, I'd be back a few years from then to tell them how I couldn't afford to go to college and that they could have prevented that by giving me the scholarship. They did, and I graduated college with no debt. That is such an unschooled mindset. You know, it's critical thinking. It's looking at all of the options, and Trudi is going to tell you all about how she does that and how she helps other people to do that. She started out as a Sudbury model volunteer and then ended up being a facilitator. So the Sudbury model was her entrance into self-directed education outside of her unschooling path. And so we pick up here talking about how in her work, people are thinking way inside the box and thinking that the only way that we can help children is by saving them, this savior complex. And that we as the adults need to like know all the things and pass it on to them. So this is us mid-conversation talking about why that's a problem and how we address that problem by the way we live our lives as parents and as social justice and social impact minded entrepreneurs.
Like, we have to save the children, from, especially in cities. Mm-hmm. Like, I do a lot of work in cities. And so there's this overwhelming kind of tone that, like, if we don't fix things, like, all the kids are going to be just, like, have these horrible outcomes. That's such a hard thing to compete with because people just always think the worst. But it does come from a good place. Yeah, they want the kids to, like, do well, and they want them to be able to compete, and they want them to be able to be successful. And I get that. they're just going about it in a way that is harmful, and the process is harmful to so many.
Why is that harmful? Why is it harmful that people are saying we want to take control of education and our children, and this generation is ellipses? We hear all the time, all of the cursings upon this generation. And I'm like, if we raise them, then what's going on? What's good? So, of course, I'm asking this question in a sense as a setup for the type of work that you're engaged in now personally and as a part of your work with people. Yeah. Just sort of reconnecting with ourselves and all of that. But I want to start there. What is wrong with doing the most?
Yeah. So a couple of things are wrong with it, right? So the first one is that we adults now, smart as we are and how many degrees we have, like, we don't really know what we're trying to prepare kids for in the future. Like, we don't know what kind of technology is going to exist. We don't know what kind of problems we're going to have. Like, we can guess, but we don't really know what we're training them up to be. We're looking at right now. We're like, these are the skills that we need right now. So let's teach all the kids. 10 years from now, like when they're out of college, we're going to need different things. We're going to need different things. And we just continue to do this. Like, for years and years, we've been doing this. So we just need to accept that we don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that traditional schools prepare us to behave, like there's no other way for me to say that, to behave, to get good grades. We reward that good behavior. And so good behavior looks a very specific way. It's, listening to teachers and responding a certain way and getting A's and B's on the test and, like all of these things.
Yes.
But we actually need people who can do other things. We need people who can think for themselves, construct critical argument, and who know how to like work in communities together and be innovative and solve problems immediately, not take 20 years to solve a problem, but that can like identify a problem or a need and respond to it very quickly. And our schools aren't designed to be able to do that. Most schools couldn't just be like, oh, we need to teach this class right now because something that happened yesterday. Like you need to have right curriculum,
right.
Like you need all these approvals and stuff like that. We need to be more responsive to like education. Yes. I remember when there was a couple things that happened recently, and we can just take like the Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, right? So that happened in September, and I do a lot of work in schools. I happened to be in a school that had a really high population of students from Puerto Rico. And I was asking them if they had like had an opportunity to talk to anyone about that. And they were like, no, like nobody had introduced concept in any classes. Nobody was taking the opportunity to talk about how like Puerto Rico is kind of like a colony of the United States. Like no one's looking at this issue and like trying to understand why there was so much frustration about it. Kids just are sad because they have family in Puerto Rico. And so no one's even addressing that part. Nobody's like, hey, like, how's your family? Like, have you heard from your people yet?
Because nothing in the design of school, as you said, is set up to deal with those realities, because that's not in the textbook. And if you deviate from it more than 10 minutes, then what? Then you're off from your job, because now you're off from what's supposed to be taught at this time.
And I've literally had teachers say that to me. Like I've had teachers in different settings be like, oh, I can't do that because if my supervisor comes in and sees me off topic, I'll get in trouble. Like I have literally heard people say that to me.
Of course.
And it's heartbreaking because there are teachers that really want to be doing the right thing and who get it and who want to be like responsive, and they feel like their hands are tied.
Yes. We talk about that all the time because it's really important that we understand that as we're building this movement and growing this movement around self-directed education, it is not in opposition of people. And teachers are people. We're talking about teachers like this other, or we tend to, but we're not. Our family members are teachers. Many of us who are in SDE, right? Or former teachers inside the system. So this isn't about teachers not doing their jobs. It's about a system that is not designed for caring teachers to actually employ methods that deal with humans and what their needs are in a community, and to deal with each individual, because you can't do that in a session where you're doing factory work, setting stuff and trying to, plug out the same statistical reality from each person.
Yeah, you just can't. And it doesn't honor the kids. It doesn't honor the teachers. I do a lot of teacher training now. And so many of my conversations are about like, well, how can we how can we get creative within what you have to work with? Like, where are the opportunities to like get to know your kids better or infuse some self-directed learning strategies into your classroom, like almost a little sneakily. And they want to be able to, a lot of them want to be able to do that. So yeah, it's definitely not in opposition to any people. There's so many people who are really trying to do great things. I like to deal in reality. Like the fact is that we can't wave our magic SDE wands, right? And make all the public schools like self-directed learning. That we can't do that.
Exactly.
So how can we like help? You know, I'm not necessarily into like changing the structure. Like I don't necessarily buy into that. But when I meet teachers in schools who are interested in just doing it a little bit better, like I'm happy to help them do that.
And we need all of the pieces. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I am all the way over on this side where I'm like, all right, when y'all come out, I'm going to make sure that things are set up here, set where, you know, but I know that again, this work, as I know you've experienced too, having been a part of it for some time, it's about people. So we are going to be where the people are. So we're not standing outside of schools like, get out, get out, get out. We're saying there are many who are getting out on their own. We could do a Get Out movie about school for real. Like, know, there are many children and families who are suffering inside of the system. So they crawl out on hands and knees or they've been out. And so there needs to be space for us to nurture those wounds too. And then also there are others who will be able to utilize the system. They have two parents at home or a parent who makes a certain amount or the right resources where being inside the system doesn't stop them from actual learning because they know how to use it as a game, especially when you talk about the college level. If you go in with your mind right to not look at college as like the answer for everything ever in life, but just a path to a specific thing or set of goals or networking or whatever, you could do college smart. Yeah,
absolutely. I strongly believe in options, right? Like the same way that public school didn't work for me and that self-directed education definitely worked for me. You know, there are other students who wouldn't be able to function necessarily with that lack of structure for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason that is. Not everything is for everybody. We need to have many options. I believe that all of those options should be equitable. I believe that all of those options should be like student-centered. You know, so I do have like some really strong core philosophies just about like having a student-centered and youth-centered approach to education in general. But I do believe that it can come in different packages.
And a part of being able to meet these needs and to have this not just be like a bunch of conversation, but reality is the training aspect. So that's why the reform part can be so dangerous. Because I look at teachers like soldiers. You know, we keep saying to our soldiers, we need you to go back in. We need you to work harder. We need you to what the hell? What happens? Those soldiers are people. So what are we saying to them? You know, what's the quality of life for them mentally, physically, financially in their own households when we keep trying to do that? So that's why I'm like, some of y'all come on over and, you know, get the trainings. Because as you said, everything ain't for everybody, but I don't think that factory shit is for anybody. So we need to figure
I'm
out.
with you there.
Yeah. But curriculum is for many somebodies. So we need adults too who are not trying to figure out how to do better in the system, but who are learning because it'll take time. Because, you know, once you're out, then we have to figure out. So if we're not using this model, what are we using? What does it look like? That's what we need to be focused on.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
And I feel like you're a part of the set of us who are doing that in different ways. So can we talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you do teacher trainings. Talk to us a little bit about the process now. What happened? So we know you went to college. We know you got a degree in theater. And then what, Trudi?
Yeah. So after I got my degree, I worked for a bit in the arts education field. I actually went back to the same organization where I was a client in that wonderful teen parent program that I was talking about. And I got to run that program for a couple years as the program director. So that was amazing. Yeah. So when I did that, I decided to go back and get my master's degree. So I got a master's in psychology and continued into a doctorate program. So now I'm a Ph.D. candidate in social psychology.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful. It's especially wonderful, Trudi, because you're a person who's talking about what you're pursuing not simply to have the letters behind the name, not simply, like many of us to fulfill what somebody told us we needed to do, but because your life is taking you down this path and these are your interests. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I definitely had days where I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I still in school? But I feel like school, it's not necessarily easy, but it comes very naturally to me to, be a student. I have a eye for that kind of critical analysis eye. So in addition to being interested in it, I felt a little bit of a responsibility. I don't know where that comes from, a moral responsibility, something really deep inside of me, because I feel like I can create, with the degree and the letters, behind my name. People just listen differently and they understand. I could be saying the same thing that I was saying 5 years ago, but because people feel like, oh, like now she has like this degree and these letters, like now we can pay attention. So, and also I'm like super committed to equity. I do a lot of work on like race equity, a lot of training, a lot of advocacy. And I feel that I can create space for people who don't have the kind of privilege that I have, because for now, like, I feel like in some ways my life has really, really changed. At one time, I didn't hold like too much privilege. And now, like, I hold a good deal of it between my education and my income and, like just some of the different abilities that I have.
Yes.
So now I'm really interested in creating opportunities for others who don't have that kind of privilege to be able to do some of the things that I can do.
And Trudi, I'm wondering how much of that is because of the path that you grew up in, that you weren't, right? Because nobody is telling you, these are not things that you studied in books. These are your lived experiences that, I saw this thing on Instagram the other day that said, shout out to women creating theory from their lives or building theory from their lives. And I was like, oh, yes, right? Because that's basically what you're saying to me right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, for example, and I know this is something that I shared with you. I recently took my son out of school. Mm-hmm. My 9-year-old Kennedy, I was calling it the rescue mission because he went to a good school. Like, by all accounts, it was a good school and people really cared about him and he was well liked and all of that. It was a good environment. But he started to really, he was just having a real hard time. And I saw all the signs of him not being able to perform the role of that student. Like, he's very active and he wants to talk all the time and he's like off task. And I started getting the phone calls about him being off task and not listening. And I was like, we're not doing this. No, because my older children, who are now 20 and 19 years old and both finished with school, they kind of went a more traditional educational path. They spent a lot of time in the public school system. And we just had a lot of challenges there. And when they were in school, I didn't have a lot of options. I was working for people and I had this schedule and I had to just do what I had to do. So when I started getting the phone calls for my son Kennedy, I was like, absolutely not. Like, this is not going to happen. And I would put him on the bus in the morning and he would like almost cry. And I was like, son. And now I work for myself, right? So I don't have to go to work. Yep. Like I work from home most of the time. And a lot of the stuff that I do, I can just bring him with me because I ain't got no boss.
Yes, another privilege. Yes.
Right, because I just can. And then, and I have a great community and I'm not a single parent anymore, right? So my fiancé, he is also an entrepreneur and like, we can manage our schedules and not have him in school.
Yep.
But because of my history, as soon as I was able to do that, I started feeling like, wow, I'm really privileged right now to be able to take my son out of school and not have to worry about who's going to watch him or being on time to work in the morning. How can I create that for other people? Like, it's not fair that like I get to do this. And I don't know if that's true or not, like that idea of it, but I feel like what can I do to extend this to other people? Because so many parents I talk to, they're sending their kids to school because they got to go to work.
It's daycare.
And it's not fair for the kid. And it's not fair for the teachers because the teachers don't want to be viewed as babysitters, right?
Exactly.
Like, and it's not fair to the like, it's just tragic all around.
Across the board, yeah.
It really is. And I was like, wow. And then, I work with schools who are like, oh, we can't get any parent engagement. And I'm like, yeah, I know why. Because like parents are just sending their kids to school for daycare. Like, I see this
and they're
problem.
tired, they're tired. I mean, of course the children have it the worst because they didn't ask to be there and they really don't have any choice. Also, for us as the adults, I didn't work nearly as hard, and we've been unschooling for like 8 years now. When I was on the PTA board, like the mental strain, and it's not like that benefited my daughters more. It was more so like the mental work of dealing with folks every goddamn week. Yeah. It was that stuff. Yeah. And then and then you feel like it's not changing anything. It's like you're constantly fighting for space for your child and for people who look like your child. So now you can transfer that energy towards, like you said, building community and doing, because I've got that same sense of commitment as you, Trudi, where it was like, okay, Chris and I can do this because we figured this out and we're a little bit crazy, really, because we're like, okay, that's not working. Bit of that. Yeah. We have support though. Both of our parents live in the same state, all of these different things. We're entrepreneurs as well. So we, like you, were like, how do we make this something that more people can do? Because that's going to benefit everybody, because we all need to be free. Yeah.
That's really my theme for this year, is getting free. Like, how can I be free? How can my kids be free? How can I help people create it for themselves?
Yes.
Different ways, through business, through education, through self-directed learning, just through our minds, like shifts in mindset, like what's the work that has to happen so that we can live more freely.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're doing that, which is what is so wonderful about your story. I know that you were working with Sudbury, and then you started looking at, you were already a parent. So over time, you saw certain things happening. But it sounds like you are using your experiences and skills to do the work in varying ways. You talk about equity work, which is something that I'd like for you to talk to us a little bit about, Trudi, because I know that we are not educated enough even about these things. When we think equity, we think, we're trying to make it so everybody gets paid the same. That's equity.
No, that is not.
Right?
I will break that down. Yes, absolutely
Please.
Not. So, yes.
I know. That's why I use that example.
I hear it all the time. Like, what a lot of people think when they hear equity, like their model for that in their head is actually the concept of equality, which is equal, right? Like, we're going to give people equal things. So equal pay, equal time, equal experience. We're going to treat everyone the same. That's where that whole like color blindness concept comes from, is just treating everyone the same. I have no interest in that. I have absolutely no interest in treating everyone the same. If we're going to achieve equity, that means that we have to make up for the inequities that have historically taken place. So that means that some people may need more while other people need less, right? In order to create a similar experience for people. Yeah. So equality is about giving everybody the same thing. Equity is about creating the conditions so that people can experience life in the same way. And that requires giving people different things. So when you apply that in classrooms, in business, in schools, in the way we raise people, in the way that we deal with each other, people have really strong feelings about what that means, what that means. And it challenges their whole mindset. Like, we've had generations of teachers who were taught in like teacher education training to be colorblind. Yes. And here I go with my friends and my colleagues being like, no, we actually need you to see color. Like, we need you to see. Like,
yes.
But if we pivot this concept though, and think, for those of us who have multiple children, we know that we can't parent our children the same way. That even within our one house, one child may need to be spoken to one way, another child might need to be spoken to another way. We get that. But for some reason, when we start expanding that into these other kinds of concepts around teaching and work, people get really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We're concerned about how people will perceive us. Like, it would be unfair. Like, well, if I give this person that much time and I give this person another time, everyone's going to be mad. And, but so in order to kind of get to a place where we can be equitable, we also have to practice other things like transparency and honesty, which, so you
has nothing to do with. I'm like, what did we switch subjects? Are we still talking about public education in schools and all of this?
And that starts really because you can't get equity without a certain degree of transparency. And that just starts making people really, really
and this is why your work is so important, because we have to have these conversations conversations. We've spent centuries avoiding these conversations, and white supremacy coasts on that avoidance, on this idea of not assigning anything to anybody. We have to have very human-centered, vulnerable, willing to look and sound crazy conversations in order to get to ask the right questions before we can even get to the answers for managing this thing.
Yeah. And this idea that it's not the people, it's the system. A system can only be a system when it's upheld by people.
Thank you.
So at the end of the day, we still have to check, well, like who is enforcing these policies? Who's continuing to allow these certain things to happen? Who's refusing to pay attention to what, what the outcomes are?
That's right.
So the whole like, well, it's the system. Yeah. And systems are upheld by people.
And we are also people. So,
and
that's when you are willing to be wrong. And I'm not saying that this is easy, but it doesn't matter that it's not easy. This is how you get to those realities of seeing what can be done. When you talk about your approach now to your 9-year-old son to saying, okay, now we're not doing this. We're not going to try to figure out how to fit you in, because these things intersect, and we don't have enough exposure to this to recognize that. So some folks who are listening, Trudi, are saying, wait, are they talking about unschooling or are they talking about social justice? And we're saying, Trudi and I say that they're connected.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It is. Yes, absolutely. They're very much connected because social justice work happens by people. And I really believe that the best kind of advocates and fighters for change are people who can be free and who aren't bound to those traditional narratives of like who they're supposed to be. Because you can't, because you're confronting systems that have been upheld for like a very, very long time.
Yes.
And you need to be open enough to challenge what that is and brave enough. And like you don't get people who can do that work unless you've grown a community of free thinkers. And so where is that happening? That's happening in SDE centers and in people's homes. Like you don't get really strong advocates from a public school system. People might go through the public school system and turn out to be advocates, but when you talk to them, you find out that that's because they had a parent or a community center or something that they were learning that stuff elsewhere. Like they weren't taught that in the school.
Exactly.
So that work has to happen somewhere. So whether it's that people are getting that awareness from home or like some amazing youth programs that exist. Like there are some really great like youth organizing and like youth leadership programs that exist that are training people to be able to do this stuff. That's where you get it. So that intersection is absolutely there. The intersection between social justice work and unschooling, deschooling, that whole
self-directed education. Exactly.
It's one and the same. It really is.
And that too opens it to me quite naturally into entrepreneurship. The show notes page for today's episode is akilasrichards.com/68. That's akilasrichards.com/68. Also want to shout out to my latest patrons over on patreon.com/Akila. Shout out to Zuli, who increased her pledge. Thank you, Zuli. And My Reflection Matters. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. I am also now a patron of My Reflection Matters. Check them out on Patreon as well. I love that platform. There are quite a few people who I have the pleasure of putting a few dollars each month towards what it is that they're building because I believe in it and it serves me and the communities that I want to see grow as well. So I encourage you to come over to Patreon, support with $1 a month, $5 a month, $50 a month, $500 a month, whatever's good and comfortable for you. You can head over to patreon.com/Akila and check me out, as well as My Reflection Matters and some of the other wonderful folks over on Patreon living their politic and giving it to us in the process. And that too opens it to me quite naturally into entrepreneurship because the first course that I produced when we really started unschooling was that the Unschooling Entrepreneur's Guide to Life and Learning or something
I
like
love
that.
Yeah.
Yes, because for me, the connection became evident. And the freer we got, the more we were deschooling and just sort of like detangling our lives from schoolishness, the more clearly I could see my interests and the other entrepreneurial communities that I could tap into. So I want to talk a little bit about that because I know you get that and you have something coming up that speaks to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that my work breaks down is I do two main kind of functions. One is I do consulting and coaching for nonprofits and school districts. That's kind of more of what you would think of as a conventional consultant. I'm doing capacity building. I'm doing training. I'm doing evaluation stuff, trying to put those degrees to work. My area of expertise are really like community organization, community engagement, equity, youth development, like all the things that are coming from, that are a mix of my life experience and my academic experience.
Yes.
So that's half of my work. And then the other half of my work is I work with individuals. So people who want to be social entrepreneurs or founders of nonprofits. And then people who work in those sectors who are trying to navigate their careers a little bit better. And it's so interesting when people come to me and, all these people have like really, really strong desires to make the world better. Like I don't work with folks who call me and they'll be like, I just want to make a lot of money. There's a lot of business coaches out there that can help you do that. But the folks I work with are people who are like, I really want to make a difference in this community. I have this business idea and I don't know where to start. Or like, I want to start this school, like, and I don't know what to do, or how to monetize it. Or like, I hate my corporate job and I have this idea, like, how do I transition out? So I really help people kind of put together not just a business plan that achieves their financial goals, but their social impact goals. Like that is like central to the work that I do. Yeah. And then a lot of coaching with people who are working in like education and social justice, human services, and just being a support to them. And also 95% of the people I work with are women of color. So just being someone who can talk to them about what they're facing in their jobs, how to navigate those tough conversations, how to ask for the money that they deserve. I love when my girls, my clients, when they text me and they're like, I just got a job offer. This is how much they offered me. Like, what should I say? And I text them back and I'm like, ask them for more. Like, ask them for more vacation time. Like, like really helping them to kind of get the confidence to just
ask for what they need.
Themselves. Yeah. Like, and it just transforms. Like people are just really, they're capable of so much and they've been stifled in so many ways because the world keeps telling them that they should just be happy with what they have.
Absolutely.
And the other one that I just hear all the time is like, oh, you're so lucky to be able to be here. Like, no, cut it out. Like,
listen, don't get me started, Trudy. We're trying to do this in one session right here.
I know, but that's the thing. Like, so like, I do a lot of work with people to just kind of silence those voices and really stand for themselves.
And so, and I'm again, the same way I'm on the side of like, I don't care nothing about the system. I'm just making sure that when we're out, there's space. I feel the same way about the work that we do. Of course, we need people to work for people. We're going to work for each other in many regards.
Yeah,
however, entrepreneurship, that particular aspect, and you use another term that I love too in terms of social impact. The type of people who are working with you are similar to the type of people who are listening to us here on this podcast, where it's not just about the money. The impact is relevant, highly relevant to us. And we get the connection between these things. So I know that you have a leadership summit that's coming up that is focused on social impact and that does have a focus on entrepreneurs and people of color all in our zone. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm very excited to be taking this on this year. So we're doing a 30-day summit. It's all virtual. I'm going to be interviewing 30 leaders who do different types of social impact work. So we're really addressing a couple of core topics. One is how to build and sustain a social enterprise. And so when I say social enterprise, I include like nonprofits because there's a lot of similarities in those models. So how to build and sustain a social enterprise. So we're going to talk to people who do fundraising and investing, like social impact investing. We're going to talk about different business models that you can use. We're going to be talking about how to be an entrepreneur, like how to think like an entrepreneur, how to look at opportunities from that entrepreneurial mindset. we're going to be talking about the need for representation. So we are working really hard to make sure that this summit is a majority people of color summit. So we're working really hard to make sure that we do that, because I've just, there's so many business coaches and summits and all these things that are not that.
Yes, yes.
And so there's a lot of context that's missing from the story.
Absolutely. And I love that you're doing that, because we need that. You know how many things I get tagged in where people are like, how are you doing this thing? And you have no people of color representing here. And then they tag me and a bunch of other people. So it's like, we definitely got to put ourselves on, don't wait for that opportunity.
Absolutely. And people can get really weird over this. And this is that old school convention around equality, right? Like, oh, we shouldn't see color. Like, it shouldn't matter like what color you are if you have the expertise. We have to be brave enough to step away from that. And
Absolutely.
I'm not like, we can intentionally recruit a diverse, whether for the summit, like guest list, right? Like for the summit, but also like if we have a business and we're employing people, we can look intentionally for a diverse staff.
Exactly. And you have to be intentional. You have to be deliberate.
Yeah. And because we haven't been, that's exactly how we are in the situation that we are right now, where we don't have that representation.
Exactly.
Because nobody has been brave enough to really lean into that and be like, no shade against white folks. Like, that's not about that.
Yes.
We want you to participate too. And we want you to participate equitably, which means that we have to give people what they need instead of treating everybody right.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I'm so glad you broke that down. I'm going to save that clip and probably play it like every damn episode. And that's exactly why I asked you that specific question, because I cringe about it too. But I also know that we just need to be educated on it is all. In a lot of spaces, we're not having these conversations. So we hear these buzz terms and then they're not explained to us, same thing with diversity. That's
exactly.
So we don't know these things, and we can kind of scoff, which I do sometimes, admittedly, but I do my very best to come back around and be like, okay, scoffing and silliness aside, let's talk about this, because everybody's not in the same circles having these conversations. So we got to be there for each other in that way too, to have these conversations together. And I'm glad we're doing it. Yeah.
And it's not easy, but people got to do the work, right? Like, people got to like put the work in to understand it. People got to have conversations with each other and with other people who know, who get it, who can provide them that support to be like, no, like, it is okay to look at things this way and to recruit a little differently and to kind of go to new spaces before you're making decisions, like, and to get more information.
Exactly. Exactly.
You can do that.
I love that you brought up no shade against white people.
Yeah.
Because these are the things that we end up saying to ourselves when we know, do they say no shade against Black people? No.
Right.
So we know good and well that the idea that if it's not white centered, then it's anti-white is a part of the problem. And so that's why it's important to say, you know what? I'm not even going to say no shade against white people, because what the hell? I'm just talking to who I'm talking to, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and we need some really strong, like, white allies to also do that work and to stand for it and to be like, no, we're not going to center ourselves. Like, we are going to look at this differently.
Yes. And to talk to your people. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Come get your people. Yeah, absolutely.
Unschooling Liberation Space. I don't know if you all are following on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/radical selfie, because that's the umbrella that I'd been under for all these years, Radical Self-Expression. So on that YouTube page, I have a playlist called Unschooling Liberation Space, the kiosk version of a larger community that I have, also called Unschooling Liberation Space. And so what I do is I just pull little bits out of this larger community to send it, because that's a membership community, to put it out there on YouTube, give little bits of information that's easy for me to share, but that also gives people just a consistent idea of what's going on in the larger community and encourage them to come in, if that's what they're looking for. So Marley and I had an interesting experience recently. And Marley is recently 14, and we had one of these like, okay, I'm older now, I need this conversations. This is her saying this to me and me being like, wait, why? Oh my God. So we talked about that. Sage did all of the directing and videography, and Marley and I talked about very candidly that experience. I'm going to be sharing that in Unschooling Liberation Space, and I'm going to do my very best to etch out some time to do a little snippet of that to share on Instagram as well, because I think it's really important to show the honest conversations that can happen, not just from the space of like, oh, I got my kid correct, which is where I think a lot of stuff comes from. But my child is teaching me a lot and I'm unlearning some things. And here's how this shows up when we take a more partner-centered approach. It is not perfect, quote unquote, but it is really partnership driven. And that's the type of relationship that I want to see more of in the world and be part of. So I'm going to put a link to that as well on the show notes page so you could check that out.
And so this is something we'll be talking about on the summit, about like recruiting, more open, equitably and diversity in the workplace and all these things.
Yes.
It's for people who are interested in kicking up their social impact work to the next level. It's going to be at least one video every day for 30 days throughout the month of April, because I'm such a big proponent of like community. Also, I believe that I'm not the expert in anybody's life. So anyone who registers for the summit, they will be directed to just a little bit of an intake so we can ask questions about like, what do you want to learn? So that I can really, as we're kind of working on the back end, we really want to address questions that people have instead of waiting till the summit.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's such an unschooling approach. I love it. That's crazy. And I'm saying that like hella tongue in cheek, because you can feel pretty much sure that if you registered for the summit, that somebody's paying attention to what you want to learn from it. And that is such an unschooling approach to thing where it's going to emerge from the needs of the people and not from the sage Trudi in the background telling you what you need to know. Yes.
It's, I have friends who I'm talking to and they're like, well, that's crazy because that's more work. And I'm like, yeah, but it's the right work. Like,
exactly.
This is not about me. It's not for me. It's about being of service of people. Yes. And I can't be in service of people unless I'm listening to what it is that they need. Do all my work that way. All of my coaching, I have advice and I have tons of knowledge that I'm willing to share, but I let my clients lead and just help them to get where they're trying to go.
That's how we grow together too. I don't want you to need me all the time. Exactly. I want you to know how to do that for yourself. Yes. Well, I can tell you already that I appreciate the work that you are doing, because I know that we didn't even get to talk about, you met up with Chame because they're in Connecticut and y'all remember Chame.
That's my new home girl.
Yes. I'm so glad that y'all connected, and I'm so hoping that when I'm out in Pittsburgh, I'm going to see about whether we can come that way or not, because it's just wonderful to know that folks are out here doing this work and making the connections too between self-directed education and so many other movements towards getting free, including understanding social impact leadership, which is such a powerful way for us to pour our life experiences, like Trudy's example, pouring our life experiences into courses of study where needed and into different environments where needed, in ways that benefit all of us. So I appreciate you for living that example, Trudi.
Well, you're so welcome. And I appreciate you for all the work that you're doing. I just love sharing this. I've probably shared this podcast with like 100 people. I'm a huge advocate of your work, and I'm looking forward to getting together hopefully over the next year and being in touch.
Thank you so much. So am I. So y'all, all the contact information for Trudi, including the Social Impact Leadership Summit and some of the work that she's doing in Connecticut, all of that will be on the show notes page. So make sure you take a look at that. Peace. Talk to you next week.
Fare of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves, owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning.
Thanks for listening to Fare of the Free Child podcast. Like the show? Then show your love or give your feedback at akilasrichards.com.